Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Nostalgia. This week we're going to discuss the evolution of girl groups. We'll go through the popular girl groups by decade throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. We're going to break down by geography, by genre, by all sorts of things. We're going to explore how they fit into the larger cultural landscape of the time. So I'm going to give you some super random, little known facts about these groups. And then later I'm going to give you my predictions for a girl band or boy band or both revival and what needs to change in the music industry before that happens. And then also how Web3 and emerging technology can facilitate that shift. So, okay, I am going to glaze over pretty much everything that happened before I was born because that's what we're doing. So to start out, okay, we had Barbershop Quartets a long time ago when basically the origin is somewhat disputed, but it was four men who would sing in a close harmony or a close harmony? Close. Anyway, so that means they would sing within one octave of one another. And this kind of opened the door for the female groups. So we had the Boswell sisters in the 1930s. We had the Andrews sisters in the 1940s. They're the ones who sang Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. And I don't know why, but if you were a dancer, you definitely went to a dance competition where girls did a tap dance to that song. I don't know why. Just every dance competition, it was a thing. So getting into the 50s, the 60s, this was really considered like the first golden age of girl groups. You had the Quartets. They sang that song Lollipop. There we go. Which I thought was kind of interesting, the story behind it, where the songwriter was inspired because her partner was late to the writing session because his daughter got a lollipop stuck in her hair. Anyway, there's so much more history behind that, but I cannot go on any tangents today. I was writing this script earlier and I just went to so many other places. Girl groups. Okay. So the first popular Black girl group was the Bobettes. They opened the door for the Chantels, which the Chantels, not to be confused with the Quartets, the Crystals, the Chiffons, the Shirelles. I say this because I get confused because there's so many groups and they all start with C or S and start with the word the. Anyway, the Shirelles are the group considered to have sustainable success as a girl group. And fun fact, Carole King co-wrote their song, Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? It was the first girl group song to reach number 1 on the Hot 100, 1961. Let's see. And Please Mr. Postman by the Marvelettes was the first number 1 song in the US for Motown Records, which was founded by Berry Gordy and was the highest earning African-American business for decades. So Motown was behind several major girl groups, including Martha and the Vandellas, the Velvelettes, the Supremes, obviously, as well as tons of highly prominent artists like Stevie Wonder, Jackson 5, Marvin Gaye. Berry Gordy's nepotism family is insane. His sister married Marvin Gaye, but biologically had a baby with his niece, who is also the mother of Bianca Lawson, aka Beyonce's stepsister. So Wikipedia is wrong. The Gordys are not related to Beyonce because a man's first wife's family and second wife's family have no relation. But you know who he is related to? And I think that this is so funny and random. His son is the guy from LMFAO, and then his grandson is the other guy from LMFAO. If you ever wonder why you haven't achieved what you want to in life, it's because you don't have a rich and famous and powerful family. Okay, back to girl groups. I gotta stay on track today. British invasion happened in the 60s. So with the exception of the Supremes, everyone was like, bye. No one cared. Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells was a 60s girl group, and their manager helped remake their image so they could transition into the 70s. The group was renamed LaBelle, and they kind of went more in a glam rock direction. There was definitely another splinter in music in the 70s. There was disco and there was rock, and girl bands were really not the norm or the prevalent acts in either of those genres. But in the 80s, we had girl groups like Bananarama, the Bangles, Go-Go's, Pointer Sisters, and I can't say any were particularly memorable or impactful. Maybe the Go-Go's, although Bananarama was far more commercially successful. Madonna was really the fixture of the 80s and is referenced by the majority of Gen X female singers as a key inspiration. I'm also saying this as someone who was not alive during the 80s, so maybe I am not the best to judge. But again, I am glazing over all the time before I was born. So as we get into contemporary times, aka the 90s and later, here are some fun stats about the best-selling girl groups of all time. And first off, let me just say this data is greatly flawed. It's merely for illustrative purposes to support my scientific claim that Spice Girls is the best band of all time. So, in the before Nick era, we have Bananarama sold over 40 million albums, which I had no idea. I only heard of them because they were on the Gilly Hicks soundtrack when I worked there. But you have to listen to the Abercrombie and Fitch episode if you want to hear more about that. The Supremes. Okay, again, these stats are from Wikipedia, so they are somewhere between moderately accurate and completely wrong. So the Supremes, it says they sold between 50 and 100 million albums, but that is literally the widest radius I've ever heard of. Like they either sold this much or they sold twice of this much. So take that for what it's worth. And then allegedly the Andrews sisters, remember they were the girlies from the 30s, sold over 75 million. But it's like, were there even that many people buying albums back then? I don't know. I feel like it could have been adjusted. You can't also really compare like apples to apples with the digital generation versus the not digital generation versus before we had all of these metrics and tracking mechanisms in place versus not. So the rankings, Spice Girls like by far outsold every other girl band with sales of about 100 million. There's 2NE1, which is a K-pop group out of South Korea, 66 million, TLC 65 million, AKB48 60 million. They're a J-pop group out of Japan. Destiny's Child 60, Little Mix 60, PCD 55. I was literally shocked to hear the Pussycat Dolls had sold this many records, but good for them. Girls' Generation, great K-pop group out of South Korea, also 34 million. Fifth Harmony, 33 million. So for context, I'm going to bring up the boy bands. BSB 160, NSYNC 70. So that's the thing too, which is really interesting. And again, we no longer compare BSB and NSYNC because they were created by the same person for the same nefarious reasons. But how much do I plug Lance Bass's documentary? He should be thanking me. It's so funny how much more commercially successful BSB was than NSYNC. I think that's kind of crazy. Anyway, NSYNC 70 million, One Direction 70, BTS is 32.7, which is so crazy to me. And then Jonas Brothers 17 million. All right, so we are going to learn a little bit about a whole bunch of girl groups. I really consider the 90s as like the coolest time for girl groups. And at the time, because people were primarily listening to radio still at this time, this was really before personal preference became the norm. It was still when we were listening to the radio to hear particular songs. And that influenced our decision to buy albums. So radio stations were largely separated by genre. There would be the pop radio station, there would be R&B, there would be hip hop, there would be rock, And so this is reflective of that. So contemporary R&B. Okay, Salt and Peppa was founded in New York City in 1985. It's actually a trio, not someone named Salt and not someone named Peppa. Okay, there's three. They were the first female rap act to achieve gold and platinum status. They're the highest selling album by a female rap act in history at the time. They're one of the best selling rap acts of all time. And along with Queen Latifah in 1995, they were the first female rap acts to win a Grammy Award. So they've really accomplished a lot, and their song Push It is iconic. Let's see. Next, we have SWV. That stands for Sisters with Voices. They are also a trio from New York City. They were formed in 1988 as a gospel group. So they also became one of the most successful R&B groups of the 1990s, one of the top-selling girl groups of all time. They sold more than 25 million records, so super successful. And the last group formed in the 1980s was En Vogue. They're a quartet, so four ladies, formed in Oakland, California in 1989. They've sold more than 30 million records. They won 7 MTV VMAs, 3 Soul Train Awards, 2 American Music Awards, 7 Grammy nominations, and Billboard magazine ranked them as the 19th most successful recording artist of the 1990s, and then the second most successful female group of the 1990s behind Spice Girls. This group was really formed to emulate those girl bands that we talked about before from the 50s or 60s, where you kind of had these interchangeable members. They would sing, they would harmonize, whereas a group like SWV had more of the gospel background, and Salt and Peppa had more of the rap and hip hop background, whereas En Vogue was really about vocals rather than rapping. The best-selling American girl group is TLC, one of my very favorites. They were formed in Atlanta in 1990. They were originally a trio called Second Nature, renamed TLC after the first initial of the girls' names, Tion, Lisa, and Crystal. And then they didn't like Crystal. She was gone, and they brought in someone else. She was a backup dancer, but her name didn't start with C. And they're like, well, we got to give her a name with a C. So her name became Chili, which was a name chosen by Lisa Lopez. And Tion became T-Boz. So Boz is meant for like boss, because Tion was kind of later. And then Lisa was nicknamed Left Eye after, I wouldn't consider this a compliment necessarily, but the guy Mike Bivins from New Edition and Belle Biv DeVoe once told her he was attracted to her because of her left eye, which was more slanted than her right eye. That is so sus. I have no further comment. Anyway, Lisa really ran with it though. She really embodied Left Eye. She wore a pair of glasses with the right lens covered by a condom, keeping with the group support of safe sex, wearing a black stripe under her left eye, eventually even getting her left eyebrow pierced. So she really ran with it. Their manager at the time who got Chili onto the scene was Pebbles. She was an 80s pop singer. She was married to L.A. Reid. You might know him from X Factor. Was it X Factor? One of those shows. Or Pink's Don't Let Me Get Me, when she says, L.A. told me you'll be a pop star. All you have to change is everything you are. That L.A. Yeah, he signed Toni Braxton. He literally started Avril Lavigne's career. Ciara. He did The Emancipation of Mimi. But yeah, wow. I love TLC so much. I'm not ready to be done talking about them, but we got to keep it going. Next, 702. Okay, 702. Do you remember them? Where are my girls at? Their first album was in 1996. They were discovered by Sinbad. Isn't that so random? They were discovered by him, I think, in like a hotel lobby in Vegas. Why were they in Vegas? Because 702 is a Las Vegas area code. That's amazing. So they went to Atlanta for this singing competition and convention, and they missed the deadline technically, but then Sinbad got them in. And then they met Mike Bivins, the Left Eye guy, who agreed to work with them. And this was what's so interesting in these girl groups. There's a lot of member changes. So they went from 4 to 3 members. Originally, it was a set of identical twins and their sister and another girl. And then Mike was like, yeah, I don't like your voices. So then he got rid of one of the twins, who sadly died of kidney failure at the age of 27 in 2008. And he ended up replacing her. But that song was iconic. Where My Girls At? I don't know any of their other songs. 808 was one of their other songs. Anyway, we got to keep going. We have so much to go over. The group Black, BLAQUE, they were active from 1999 to 2004. They were signed to Lisa Left Eye Lopez's label. They were out of Atlanta. Also, we saw a lot of awesome girl groups out of Atlanta at this time. Black has said that their name means believing in life and achieving a quest for unity in everything. We love. They played members of the East Compton Clovers in the classic cheerleading movie Bring It On. And yes, they had a song that featured the most talented member of NSYNC, JC Chasez. One girl had a role in the Lance Bass Emmanuel Shariki film that I've still not seen yet to this day, On the Line. These girls were NSYNC adjacent. Let me tell you, they opened for them. They opened for TLC. And you know what's so funny? I went back and listened to their song with JC Chasez. And if you look on Spotify or anywhere, it says featuring NSYNC. It doesn't say featuring JC Chasez. You know why? Wasn't supposed to be JC. You know who was supposed to be? Justin Timberlake. And you know why Justin Timberlake wasn't on that song? Because he was busy filming Model Behavior. This blew my mind. He was filming Model Behavior, Disney Channel original movie. Therefore, he was too busy to sing in this song. The other thing about this song is I had a major Mandela effect with this song because I swore that it was a different singer. I know there's a remix of this song featuring 50 Cent, but I swore the original song was sung by a man who was not JC Chasez. I think also because I remember the lyrics, my Tim's, my baggy jeans, my thug appeal, and I can't picture JC Chasez singing that authentically, I guess. But also this was the year 2000, so it tracks. If anybody else has also been affected similarly by this Mandela effect, where it's like you swear that it happened this way, but it's like, no, there's no trace of anyone other than JC Chasez singing this song, Bring It All to Me with Black. I don't know. Anyway, sadly, Natina Reed, she died after being struck by a car in 2012, and Black did not end up reuniting. Next is 3LW, stands for Three Little Women. Their debut single was in 2000 with No More, parentheses, Baby I'm a Do Right, and Play's Gon' Play was another hit. They weren't targeted at children per se, but they were on Nickelodeon. In 2022. In 2002, they were on All That. And actually, in the year 2000, they were on the show, Nickelodeon show, Taina. Do you remember Taina? Okay, as this band called Blue Mascara, which I used to wear blue mascara in high school all the time. That's so amazing. But 3LW was almost dropped by their label after, one, their music leaked on the internet, which was like a huge deal at the time, and two, they weren't appealing enough for, quote, urban radio. Again, the early 2000s, lol. There was some drama with 3LW that apparently their split was because of a fight at Kentucky Fried Chicken where one of the girls threw a KFC 2-piece meal in the other girl's face. I don't know if video footage exists of this, probably not, but but that was the tea. And despite all of this randomness, Adrian and Keely Williams signed on to do Cheetah Girls for Disney and then actually became a band with Raven Simone. That's so Raven. And then the other girl, Sabrina, might be her name. I don't know, whatever. I'm not a Cheetah Girls expert, but the point is that 3LW was a pretty good runway to Cheetah Girls. And then Adrian from 3LW, as we know, dated Rob Kardashian from like 2007 to 2009, which was when the show started. But what was amazing is that she was already way more famous than Rob and continues to be. Next band is Cherish. They were out of Atlanta. They were from 2003. They were four sisters whose parents were in the music biz, and Do It To It, I think, was a one-hit wonder, but then the remix, or like a remixed version, went viral on TikTok, and now young people dance to it at bars and they don't know the original song exists. And it's like, please just know history. You know what I mean? No history. Speaking of sisters, there's some really interesting sister girl bands out there. There are many of them. My favorite is Tegan and Sara. They're technically not a girl band. They are just two sisters that play instruments. So I guess they are a band and they are girls. So anyway, I love them. I also love Aly and AJ, Disney bubblegum pop sister duo. The Veronicas, girlies from Australia, love them. Their real names are Jess and Lisa, but their name comes from the film Heathers. Remember? The Veronicas. The Veronicas were like the plastics from Mean Girls before Mean Girls. And actually, I've only thought about this extensively. We haven't done a pod episode about it yet, how Mean Girls is literally just a ripoff of everything else that came before it. But anyway, they're called the Veronicas. However, the name was also connected to the cartoon or comic character Veronica from the Archie comic series. And then the people from that sued the Veronicas. And then the Veronicas were like, can you not? And they ended up actually settling and getting to be featured in the comic. So I thought that ended pretty well. And then sisters, also worth mentioning, Nicole and Natalie Albino. They are New York-based Puerto Rican sisters, aka Nina Sky. Move Your Body Girl. We love that song. They had several Latin club hits, and I had no idea. They are also sisters. So, oh, actually, we have, I literally have a list of so many sisters. Okay, we're going to really quickly go by, before we get to the American pop groups, we're going to take a little trip around the world. We're heading over to Ireland. So the Cores, this is majority girl. This is not all girl because it's three sisters and their brother. They're from Ireland. Bewitched, in my opinion, the best girl group from Ireland, representing their country very well. That's two sisters and then two twins, a set of twins and two other girls. Okay, I think we're wrapping it up with the sibling thing. We've left Ireland. We're going over to England. So we have a lot of girl groups that are British. We have All Saints, Sugar Babes, Girls Aloud, The Saturdays, Atomic Kitten, Mystique. All awesome. And not entirely girl group, but majority girl group, S Club 7. My personal favorite, After Spice Girls, who I'm just going to dedicate a completely separate episode to. Although they're the best-selling girl band of all time, I can't talk about them in this episode or I will never stop. I will never stop. They need their own episode. So, where were we? Scandinavia. Okay. The A-Teens were also, okay, half, technically it's two guys and two girls, but I just want to mention them because when it comes to bubblegum pop, they were so important. And they first came out as an ABBA cover band. So it was like ABBA, but for the new generation, which is really interesting because if you think about some of the lyrics, it's inappropriate for like a literal like 14-year-old to be singing. But anyway, that's a whole nother tangent that we cannot even get into today. I will be here all day. I don't want to keep you here all day. Anyway, but 18s, they had some sweet original songs. I think their original songs were actually best. Upside Down, Halfway Around the World. Actually, who knows? Those could be remakes. I have no idea. But those are my favorite songs of theirs. Lilo and Stitch soundtrack, also incredible. Play was an extremely important bubblegum pop band out of Sweden. They're like as sickeningly sweet as it gets. They're straight up limited to. They're just everything's an earworm. It's like so poppy. They formed in 2000 after a talent search in Sweden, and these talent searches didn't really happen much anymore starting in the 2000s for bands. It started being more about like TV shows about bands, if that makes sense. Like when reality TV became a genre, you weren't answering a casting call to be in a band, you were answering a casting call to be on a TV show in a band. So we see pop stars, X Factor, etc. The last band out of Scandinavia that I want to mention was M2M from Norway. It was two girls. I bought their CD at Walmart. I specifically remember this. They wrote their songs, they played instruments, which was highly unusual for teen pop artists. And Marion Raven, the brunette, she dated Zach Hansen in 2000 when M2M was on tour with Hansen. And she stated that the M2M song Everything was written about her breakup with Zach Hansen and the heartbreak after the tour finished, and he did not call her. She ended up writing another song about him as well that Pixie Lott recorded. And it's like basically she was Taylor Swift before Taylor Swift, and we love her for that. Okay, moving right along, we have, okay, do you guys remember Las Ketchup? They were a Spanish trio, and their song, the Ketchup Song, was like this absolutely insane one-hit wonder. It was the biggest Spanish language anything since the Macarena. I have no idea where they came from. I have no idea where they went. I have literally no information about them. But that song was just huge. I think it was in the early 2000s, maybe 2001 or 2. Also in 2002, out of Russia was Tattoo. I cannot overstate how problematic yet of the time they were. They were contrived by a man to serve the male gaze, with the whole like schoolgirl thing. It's so gross to even talk about, but it was in their contract that they had to quote act as lesbians. Again, you have to remember this was 2002 and where we were in the world. Again, problematic. Also, their brand image was a little bit there were inconsistencies because one of the girls got pregnant and everyone's like, wait a second, how? There's also also that assumption is problematic, but again, I can't keep you here all day. I would say nowadays the main issue there was that when she got pregnant, it was by someone who was already married, so that's not good. Okay, we got to move on from them. On to K-pop. We have J-pop and K-pop, which are designed to be exports. So all of the music that gets exported out of Japan and Korea, South Korea, are made for international audiences. And so it's really cool to see how far reaching the groups have. I'm obviously huge BTS army and love and am fascinated by idols and fandom, even though there's There's so much nuance there too. I am getting so sidetracked. These are just the building blocks for conversation. You know what I mean? Anyway, I would say the contemporary K-pop girl group that I am obsessed with and absolutely love is Blackpink. And they've just been training. I don't mean training like in their training period. They've been performing. They've been together in addition to their training beforehand. I think what was Jennie training for 6 years before they started performing? It's kind of crazy how demanding the industry is of idols. So I hope that Blackpink does go on that world tour so I can go see them. But then after that, they, similar to BTS, take a hiatus to really protect the mental and physical health of their stars. Okay, we've made it back to the US. Girl bands were highly contrived and usually by people of varying sketchiness trying to majorly cash in with varying levels of success. And at this time, we also saw a lot of child actors or stars to pop star pipeline kind of evolve. This was majorly seen with solo stars for elder millennials from Kids Incorporated and Mickey Mouse Club, like all of Justin, Brittany, Christina, JC, etc. To we see it not so much with girl bands because by the late 2000s, girl bands had already dissipated, but we see it with the Disney stars like Hilary Duff, Lindsay Lohan, Demi Lovato, Selena Gomez, etc. So one girl band that I was going to say I love. Can I really say I love? I don't know. It's Wild Orchid with Fergie, aka Stacey Ferguson. They were formed in 1990. They had a career throughout the 90s, which I know absolutely nothing about. I didn't know of any of their songs. If you did, please tell me. And I want to know what the perception of them was in the 90s because I have no idea. I know them from when they debuted as the hosts of Fox Family Channel's Saturday morning show Great Pretenders, which was one of my favorite TV shows from 1998 to 2001. So what would happen was young kids would lip sync popular songs and compete for prizes. So the show lasted for 4 years. Loved. I need to find it on YouTube. I'm sure it's on YouTube. Great Pretenders ended when Fox Family Channel merged with ABC and then became ABC Family. Remember? Okay, JC Chasez. He's back again. Like, I'm giving him more press right now than he's gotten in the last 20 years. You're welcome. He wrote and co-produced several of the songs for their second album. Literally, who knew? No one knew. Stacy and one of the other girls had been in Kids Incorporated. Did I mention that? I don't think so. And in 2001, she meaning Stacy had also left the band. She had a drug problem, but not before May 2001. There was this Minneapolis-based radio station that hosted a concert, KDWB, that featured Wild Orchid and the hip-hop group Black Eyed Peas. So Black Eyed Peas was will.i.am and then these two other guys. And so that's where Stacy met will.i.am. And that's how they got in touch. And she ended up joining Black Eyed Peas in 2002 under the stage name Fergie. And when it comes to Fergie, the rest is history. The next group, Eden's Crush. Do you remember them? Eden's Crush was an American girl group who was created on the TV series Pop Stars on the WB, produced by super famous David Foster. Nicole Scherzinger was in the group. This was 2001. I have no idea how my brain still has room to remember their song Get Over Yourself, but I do. Fun fact, Wild Orchid co-wrote the song. I don't know what this means, but the song's called What's Good for the Goose. I have no idea what that's supposed to mean, but they co-wrote that song that appeared on Eden Crush's debut album, Pop Stars. And then another fun fact, Nicole Scherzinger was engaged to this guy in the band 311, and their song, this is the only song of theirs that I know, Amber is the color of your energy. That song was about Nicole. Fun. Love to hear it. Next, Dream. Dream was a group originally formed in 1998. The lineup was finalized in 2000. They were a group of like 13-year-old girls. I totally did not realize how young they were at the time because they were signed to Bad Boy Records by Sean Combs after he was Puffy, before he was P. Diddy. And their debut album was released in 2001. It was called It Was All a Dream, which is obviously a nod to the late Notorious B.I.G., who Sean Combs worked very closely with. I did not get that connection when I was 11 years old, and they were only around for that one album and for a year. But yeah, that's kind of like what it's looked like throughout history. My predictions, okay? Due to hyper-individualistic social media tendencies, we will continue to see musicians be solo artists and complain about having to have viral moments for their record labels like Halsey, Doja Cat, Charlie XCX. The list goes on. I do think that K-pop is going to continue to be successful and gain some traction here in the US. Another idol group will come out here in the US, and I think it could go one of two ways. It could completely blow up and be super successful, or ARMY will get really pissed. So we'll see which happens. The fandom can be particularly critical about the management company, but at the same time, just as someone who has business acumen and has extensively studied the inner workings of the business side of BTS, the company is ultimately just going to make moves that make them money. So again, we'll see what the actual fan sentiment is and how that goes. Let's see. I think with Web3 and the evolution of the internet, the music industry will be substantially changed by the end of the decade. And that's a very safe prediction to make because it's already happened so many times. Think about it. In the 2000s, we went from CDs to Napster, LimeWire, iTunes, iPods. And in the 2010s, we went from iPods to the mass adoption of iPhones. We had Pandora. We had Spotify, which we moved to streaming instead of downloading MP3 files. And then we also started with paid subscriptions. And I think the 2020s will see a technological shift at an even more accelerated rate, and it's going to collapse decades worth of progression into a few years. I am super bullish on Web3, obviously, aka I have a very optimistic outlook, but NFTs will become membership cards, concert tickets, certificates of authenticity for memorabilia, and more. When you buy something on Ticketmaster, it already says with some orders that it comes with a digital collectible, whatever it's called. And it's like, that's just kind of paving the way for what's to come. I do think that digital collectible demand and ownership will skyrocket, that indie artists will be able to cultivate communities and put their music and other content out on a platform where they actually own that content and get to make money off of that content, unlike social media or through a record company where artists end up making like a tiny, tiny fraction of what they ultimately create. Unsigned artists will blow up, and I think that tastemaking will continue to develop as a career path, aka people who curate playlists, write blogs, or otherwise aggregate information from around the interwebs to show what's new, what's up and coming, what's cool. And I'm really excited to see how Web3 evolves fandom. Fans will be connected to artists in a way that they have never seen before. And obviously BTS, ARMY, and Swifties are the only fandoms I can think of that are even close to this right now. I think the mass adoption of emerging technology is going to be relatively messy, and this space will not, at least in the next year or few years. Stick with fans that don't understand the technology. There will be tons of pushback, but it's going to be interesting to see these antiquated, opaque methods of the old school industry become obsolete and young people, Web3 native people, come into the picture and begin to define the landscape. I think bands may come into the scene again in the late 2020s. But in order to do that, legal and accounting transparency need to change. Musicians need to have good lawyers or know how to read their contracts in order to stop getting screwed over. Musicians are also going to need some level of financial literacy to know exactly where their revenue is going and who's getting a cut. We've heard way too many of the same exact story. The same exact thing happens. Even of the biggest artists in the world at the time, like TLC and Backstreet Boys, people steal from them. Their own people steal from them. I could also see a band of gender fluid teenagers or young adults break out onto the scene, either young Gen Z or Gen Alpha. This is the antithesis, maybe the antidote to why bubblegum pop died after the late 90s, early 2000s bubble popped. It was oversaturation, over-commercialization, and homophobic attitudes that said boy bands are too effeminate, so they were not appealing to young men. And youth culture is absolutely evolved since then with the end of monoculture, aka we are not all consuming the same advertisements anymore, with the soon to be end of the social media era, aka Web 2's dominance, which is the era of people knowing they're being constantly sold to, that their data is constantly sold and they're kind of sick of it, but they don't know what to do. And that's also changing with the representation of queer people in pop culture. So it would be really cool to see a band break out in sometime in the 2020s where there's a combination of genders, or if the gender among members is ambiguous and kind of blurs the lines between a girl band, a boy band, and is just a band. I could also see a band of blended genres, for example, pop punk and rapper hip hop. We've had singers, or I don't know if they're really singers or rappers like Machine Gun Kelly, Black Bear, explore this crossover. So I think that may be able to happen, or have these solo artists come together and form a supergroup. So a supergroup is like a band where it's people who are in other bands or other artists coming together. And people have been doing this since like the 60s, the 70s. But I could see that happening. It's just the supergroup is going to be more of a mixed genre. And then I could also see with Netflix and streaming services making more reality programming around music. I just don't think it would be like Making the Band, American Idol, X Factor necessarily. Like, we've seen talent shows, we've seen talent scouting, and that contrived group brought together by super high level executives. And maybe it will be more music documentaries. Maybe it will be more footage showing the process behind how the band works. We've already seen a bunch of concert documentaries like Blackpink, Taylor Swift, Ariana Grande, Pink, etc. Or maybe we're going to get a new format of a reality show. I think that with evolving technology and with evolving societal attitudes, that music, that culture, that girl bands, that the ideas behind them, what they represent, who they represent, it is all going to continue to shift. And I hope that this podcast, among a dark week, dark times, was just a little bit of something lighthearted that you could focus on. I fully acknowledge that much of pop culture, it perpetuates harmful ideals. And so if we can just be able to examine the past through a contemporary lens, understand that it's easy to critique the past from the vantage point of the present, and that if we can learn from the past, we can ultimately have more empathy for each other and make a better future, I'm all for it. All right. Make sure to catch up on Nostalgia if you haven't gotten through all of the episodes. Watch us on YouTube or Spotify. You can listen on Spotify Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts, please, 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 if you like the show, share it with someone that you know, and then talk to them about the random things that we ended up discussing. I would love that. And as we grow the podcast and the ecosystem, it's super, super important that you tell people about the show. Come on. I would love it. Love it if you reviewed the show on Apple. You can also subscribe on all of the platforms. You rate all of those great things. And I super, super appreciate your support. I will see you next time, and girl power.